to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for joining us today. Get ready to be inspired and motivated to live a high-impact life. Now, here's Rick.
Welcome to the Point of Impact podcast. I'm Rick McDaniel. It's great to have you joining us in this new year, 2026, and I'm excited to get this year started and to share with you today a fascinating story of the building of the Panama Canal. Was able to just be there a couple weeks ago and see it and transit it myself, and I can't wait to share the story. But more importantly, not just the story, but the key to accomplish what seems impossible, because the Panama Canal was like accomplishing the impossible, as you will hear about today. The key to accomplishing what seems impossible in your life, that this year could be the year that your dream finally becomes a reality, that you finally break through that barrier that's holding you back. So it's going to be great. I'm going to be challenged to keep it all into 30 minutes because this is a 30-minute podcast, always has been, always will be, and we're well over 200 episodes, heading for 250 this year. And so I want to stick to the 30-minute format, but it's going to be challenging today. Before I do that, just have to say a couple things. At the beginning of the year, I pump out all kinds of great content for the new year. And so I would just encourage you, take advantage of the content that I am putting out. The easiest way is just go to rickmcdaniel.com and check out what's on there, but also sign up because you'll get the weekly devotion every Tuesday morning. You can also get a Thursday piece, which will always involve the kind of content I'm talking about. Follow me on social media. I mean, I'm on it every day but Saturday. So it's on X or Twitter, it's Rick McDaniel. On Facebook, it's Rick McDaniel HIL. On Instagram, it's Rick McDaniel _official. Those are going to be your best ways. You're going to see lots of content. Not every day on Instagram, just because the picture nature, but every day on X for sure, and many days on Instagram, every day on Facebook as well. So I would just highly encourage you to take advantage of all the content that I'm putting out there for this new year that can help you to have this greater, successful year that I know you want to have. The other thing is, a lot of people at the beginning of the year are like, I need to fill my mind with something positive each day. Or as a Christian, you might say, I really need to read the Bible every day and connect with God regularly. And the best way to do that is through devotional. And I've written not one, but 2 devotionals. This is Living and Greater. Each of them has 100 devotions. Most people, when you take the weekends and misses for different things, it usually takes them 4, 5, 6 months to finish a devotional. So if you got 2 of them, you're good for most of the year, if not the entire year. So you could grab both of them on Amazon or at rickmcdaniel.com, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, whatever, wherever you like to get your books, you should be able to find them there. Amazon seems to be the one most people go to, and sometimes they have sales, and it can be even a better deal with them. And if you got free shipping, you're in good shape. So, but I can sign a copy for you if you want to buy it from us. We'd be happy to send it to you. But that's a great way to it takes like 3 minutes, 2 pages. You'll read a great story, very interesting story. You'll read a scripture. There'll be application. You'll be motivated. You'll be challenged. You'll get in the right positive, optimistic mindset. It's the way to go, and it's a super way to have these kind of resources available to you. So there you go. Lots of good stuff, and I got to stop, though, because I want to jump into this. So as I said, recently got to transit through the Panama Canal. That was a dream of mine for years. My hometown is Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Locks, because my hometown had locks on the Connecticut River. Go way back into the early 1800s. There's these falls called the Enfield Falls, which is just up the road. And so people couldn't transit through. They would have to offload their cargo, whatever, very time consuming and expensive. So they built this 5-mile canal, and they installed locks in my hometown, which is why the town below us is called Windsor, and we're called Windsor Locks, because we had the locks, and those locks functioned for many, many, many years, probably like 150 years, from like the 1820s to the 1970s. And when I was a kid, it was a big deal. The locks were just something that, was the identity of our town. And so we learned about them. And when you're a little kid, you know that the greatest locks in the world are the ones at the Panama Canal, because those locks are the locks that changed the world. So love the opportunity and thankful to God for the chance to do it. And so got to go through the locks that literally like 110 years ago they opened, and they're still working. I went through the same locks. That's how good a job they did building them. Now, about 20 years ago, they built these larger ones for these massive super ships that they now have. And so there are these new sets of locks, but we went through the original ones. It's like almost 50 miles. Started in the Pacific, if you would. That's another thing about the canals. Everyone thinks it's east-west, but it's actually north-south. Just so you come in through Panama City, and you're technically in the Pacific, and then you make your way through the canal and you come out in the Caribbean or the Atlantic. So was a fantastic experience, but I had been spending a lot of time researching it. I read the seminal book, which is almost 50 years old now, but David McCullough's The Path Between the Seas, 600 plus pages. I mean, it's gigantic, but it gave a lot of information. Then I got more information, going to the visitor center, hearing a lecture at another place, being able to see the movie that they it's not even that old. It's only like 6 years old. Morgan Freeman narrated, and got to see it all for myself in person, and then also got to actually go through the locks. Fantastic experience. The construction of the canal was the largest, most expensive project ever mounted anywhere at that point in human history. Nothing like that had been done before. Nothing so massive, elaborate, or systematic had ever been attempted. Such a monumental achievement could have never happened, however, without determination, perseverance, persistence, grit. Use whatever word you want. They all mean the same essential thing. And that's what it took. That's the key. That was the key to this incredible achievement. And how incredible was it? Well, it cut the distance between the Atlantic to the Pacific by 8,000 miles. Yeah. That's 3 weeks travel time. So now ships, like these massive ships that carry 11,000 containers, can travel through the canal. Cars, appliances, all kinds of goods make their way across the world thanks to the canal. Over 1 million ships use the Panama Canal each year. I mean, you're talking about a total game changer. I mean, this changed the world. It certainly changed the global economy forever. It is an absolute massive, massive achievement. But boy, it was an incredible challenge to be able to pull off. It was a dream for years. You go all the way back to like after the Civil War, they're talking about how there needs to be a canal. They need this mid-continental canal. And they did. But boy, the journey to that becoming reality is filled with crushed dreams and financial ruin, enormous adversity, but ultimately triumph. So the first who attempted it were actually the French. There was a guy, Ferdinand de Lesseps. He had built the Suez Canal. And so he's pretty confident he could build the Panama Canal. And they created this private company, and that's important because they didn't do it through the government. And as you'll learn later, wow, what a mistake. They created this company. They sold shares, multiple rounds, at least 4 rounds of investment. Huge sums of money were raised, and huge sums of money were spent. It was not like the Suez Canal. Later, de Lesseps would say it was 10 times more difficult because the Suez Canal is longer, but it's through desert, and desert and jungle are very, very different. So after almost a decade, the French had to quit. They had to accept defeat. Now, de Lesseps had insisted on a sea level canal instead of one with locks, even though the two oceans have different sea levels. The tide is rising 20 feet on the Pacific side. It's only rising 3 feet on the Atlantic. It doesn't take an engineer to figure that one out, but he just would not stay off of it. So the decision on a sea level passage was the single greatest factor for failure. That is undeniable, but it certainly was not the only factor. There were many, many other factors, and here's one. Over 20,000, yes, 20,000 workers died, most from yellow fever and malaria. It was absolutely a death zone. They were dealing with such incredible issues of jungle, the insects, the bugs. I have right now, today, I have all over my body, I have bites. Now, not all of them, I transited through the canal, but I also was in the jungles of Panama and also in Costa Rica. And I have bites all over my arms and legs. Now, big deal, right? But these guys, this was a different day, and they had yet to figure out what caused malaria and yellow fever. Not to mention there's snakes, there's tarantulas, and there are animals there, like animals that you might not think would be there, that are like tigers. Stuff that you are in a jungle, and you are dealing with ferocious animals. You are dealing with all kinds of enormous challenges. And it was just too much for them. So they had to ultimately quit. But here's the really heartbreaking part. Over 800,000, more than 750,000 Frenchmen and women had invested in this company. Some of them gave their entire life savings. Some of them gave their entire retirement. And those people lost everything. This is one of the sort of unknown stories, I think, lesser known, let's say. It was the largest, most significant financial collapse on record. It was a historic financial failure. So it wasn't just, the French didn't build the canal. It's that incredible numbers of people lost massive amounts of money. About a decade later, America says we're going to build the canal. Now, here's another lesser known story in history. President Roosevelt was like, okay, it's the Senate's decision, and the Senate had to choose between Panama and Nicaragua. And just so you know this from the start, Nicaragua was always the favorite. In fact, a private company, another little known fact, in the early 1890s, a private American company went to Nicaragua to try to build the canal. They failed as well. They only lasted a couple years. But Nicaragua was the place that most Americans thought of. Now, why? Because the Nicaragua Canal would be 135 miles longer. It would require more locks. It would be more expensive to operate, but it was the favorite. So there was this massive debate, 14 days of debate in the Senate. And at the end of the day, and that's a whole nother story. You could do a whole episode just on the political aspects of that. Panama won out by a mere 8 votes. So America is going to pursue the seemingly impossible task of building the Panama Canal, of cutting through a jungle. By the way, not just the jungle. Guess what goes through Panama and all of Central America and into South America? The Continental Divide, the one that starts up in Canada and goes through Colorado. I've been on the Continental Divide. I've been right there at the point of the divide, Rocky Mountain National Park. All the water to the west goes one way, all the water to the east, and ultimately Pacific and Atlantic, by the way. Ultimately, that's the division point. That divide comes, so they had to cut. Calabria Cut, it was called. They had to cut through sheer rock. Just a massive, massive undertaking. Roosevelt tabbed John Wallace to be the chief engineer. He only lasted a year. He was overwhelmed by the monumental task, the brutal climate, the fear of yellow fever and malaria. Just massive. So then an engineer, John Stevens, took over, and he proposed a lake and lock plan. Here's another thing. I never knew this. I don't think many people realize the Panama Canal is not really a canal. Here's what it is. You start out at the canal, then you go through 3 locks, and that lifts you up to this man-made lake, the Gatun Lake. And the Gatun Lake is big. I mean, when you're in a ship and you're in the middle of it, you get to that point, it's not a canal at all. You can't even see sides. You can't see the sides of land. It's a big, big lake. So you go through this big, and this lake was formed because of this river, which is the river which was a big problem for the French, because when the rainy season came, they just couldn't deal with the raging river, and so they made the raging river. They harnessed it so much that they built a dam, and they put a power plant on the dam, and that power plant to this day powers all the needs, the electrical needs, because the locks are all electrically run. All the electrical needs are powered by that power plant at the dam at Gatun Lake. All right, you go through the lake, then you go through 3 more locks. That drops you back down into another canal, and then that canal takes you the rest of the way. He also tasked Dr. William Gorgas, who was an army physician, to eradicate yellow fever. And of course, what he discovered was that and malaria for that matter. But the yellow fever was even easier than malaria, because malaria required a vaccine. The yellow fever, you got to get rid of these mosquitoes everywhere in the standing water. You know, the word malaria, it's fascinating. It actually literally means like false air, bad air. Like they just thought it had something to do with the air and didn't realize it wasn't the air, it was the mosquitoes. And so they just started fumigating. All standing water removed, fumigating, and no joke, within 2 years, no one was dying from yellow fever. No one was dying from malaria anymore. And also, Stevens built like ball fields and better housing for the workers, and it just became a better working environment. Better, let's qualify that. I mean, you're still talking about enormously dangerous, as we'll get into in just a moment. But then after 3 years, Stevens resigned and never gave an explanation why. And Roosevelt got so mad about it that when he wrote his memoirs, he never even mentioned Stevens. Like Stevens did Lock and Lake, that's Stevens. Getting Dr. Gorgas to eradicate yellow fever, Stevens. Building a better living situation for the workers, Stevens, doesn't even get mentioned. He was so mad at him. So a guy at that time, Colonel, later became General George Goethals. The Goethals, if you've ever gone on the Goethals Bridge between, say, Staten Island, New York, and New Jersey, that's the guys. That's him. He's the guy. So he came. He brought this military mindset, and but the demanding conditions. I mean, the raining season, you're talking about 8 months a year, it rains, 120 annual inches of rainfall. I mean, just flooding, mudslides. It's just unbelievable. Then you got incredible heat and humidity. And then you've got this Calabar cut where the midday temperature was like never hardly less than 100 degrees and many times 120 to 130 degrees. You want more? Okay, on a typical day, there were more than 300 rock drills in use, plus steam shovels and dynamite blasts. The noise level was deafening and could be heard for miles. I mean, this is literally the situation you're dealing with. And I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, I could go on and on and on about how hard it was to work there. So you say, well, then yellow fever, malaria eradicated? Yeah, okay, but death was still omnipresent. I mean, men were killed by flying rocks, crushed to death by machines, blown to bits by dynamite. I mean, over 5,000 men died. So you had 20,000 from France and then 5,000 more in America. There's your 25,000 plus people that died. It's just an absolute, total and complete challenge in every sense of the word. It was just so difficult and so hard to deal with. And then, of course, you've got, just year after year of going through this, and then imagine digging out this man-made lake. There's a part in McCullough's book where he says that if you want to understand like the level of digging required, you could dig, this is crazy sounding, right? 10 feet wide and 35 feet deep. You could dig a canal and you could go across the entire United States and you'd get within 50 miles of the end from the Atlantic to the Pacific. You can see my East Coast bias. I keep using Atlantic first. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, all the way through America, you'd come within 50 miles of the Pacific. If you dug up a 35-foot deep, 10 foot wide, miles of canal, that is the amount of dirt that had to be dug out in order to build the Panama Canal and to build that Gatun Lake. I mean, it's just, and then the engineering involved and all the blasting, the dynamite, the digging. It was just an incredible task that they took on. A massive challenge. Now, get ready. On August 15th, 1914, the canal opened for business. You're not going to believe this. Under budget and 6 months ahead of schedule. Under budget and 6 months ahead of schedule. What project is ever under budget and ahead of schedule? And this massive 10-year project, that is just incredible. Here's the most phenomenal thing in my opinion. Never, ever in history, in all these years, has there ever been accusations of bribes and all of the fraud and abuse that happened in France. They had trials, lawsuits, people went to jail. But in America, when America did it, nothing. No fraud, no bribery, under budget, and ahead of schedule. The culmination of 20 years, if you take the French and the American together, phenomenal effort and perseverance. There it is. Now, what's that have to do with you? Well, what's the impossible thing in your life? This new year, you could see the impossible become possible if you practice similar persistence and determination. That's the key. The English preacher Charles Spurgeon once said, by persistence, the snail reached the ark. It's hilarious. By persistence, the snail reached the ark. How did that snail get on the ark? Man, just by persistence. You've just got to have a determination. You've just got to have a persistence. You've just got to persevere and have the grit. This could be the year that you finally stick with it. No more quitting, no more giving up, no more excuses for why it can't be done or is simply too difficult. The canal went from a dream, a many decades long dream, and really centuries long if you go back to the conquistadors in Spain. It became a reality by grit and determination, by consistent progress in a singular direction. That's what it takes. It can be done. Whatever it is in your life that is not where you want it to be, whatever dream has not been realized, whatever accomplishment is just mocking you, you can do it, but it will require one thing: determination, grit, persistence, perseverance. Maybe you're disappointed with the pace of your progress or the rate of your accomplishments. Yeah, maybe you are. That's we call that a holy discontent. Like I know I could do more. I know we could be more. You may wish you're further along than you are. It takes time for the work to be done in our lives. And unfortunately, it takes longer than most of us think it should. So we get frustrated by the slow pace. We wish for more. We want more. But here's what I can tell you. If you have perseverance and endurance, you can see it become a reality. You may lack money, ability, resources, but here's what I can tell you. $1 million of determination will get it done. It will get it done. This story of the canal is an amazing story of what can be done when you just stay after it and stay after it. Went through 2 leaders before Goethals finally got the job done. Went through, you go back to the French, a sea level plan had to be changed to a locks plan. I mean, there's going to be things that are going to happen. There's going to be setbacks. I mean, it's likely that there will be setbacks. So, might be illness strikes or loss hits, relationships end. Time and time again in the building of the canal, there were setbacks and they needed to do various forms of restructuring. They would have to just look at this situation and say, there were these mudslides that would happen because of the rains. I mean, imagine you've been digging and digging and digging for weeks, maybe months, and then this terrible rain comes and the mudslides happen and all this dirt comes back down into the very place that you just dug it out of. And it just could have been so easy at that point to just be like, give up. But they did not give up. And all the accidents that happened with dynamite and the flying debris. And there's a picture I saw where they're like searching for friends because like one of these mudslides happened while they were working. People actually got buried alive. I mean, it's some brutal, brutal stuff. Whatever you're going to go through, I don't know it'll be as brutal. I read the story of one of the rains and they went out to survey and there was water halfway up the trees and all the tops of the trees were black and they were like, looked like fire, but how could there have been fire with rain? And they got closer and the trees were black because they were filled with tarantulas. Filled with tarantulas. I mean, snakes. Whew. Despite whatever you encounter, you have to choose to persevere past the disappointments and through the inevitable pain. The fact of the matter is you can hang on a lot longer than you think. You can. You may think you can't do it anymore. It's so hard. It's so challenging. But so was building the canal. There were so many challenges that they faced. So many obstacles that had to be overcome. Was so difficult in so many ways, but they just kept after it, kept after it, kept after it. And you can too. And sometimes the toughest it'll ever be is right before the breakthrough. I mean, like you just given up too soon and it's like, man, it's right there in front of you. It can happen. And it can. I'm sure there were many times, many of the workers and many of the leaders are probably like, man, this is just too hard. This is just too difficult. It's just, and imagine losing your initial leader and then after Wallace is gone and 3 years later Stevens is gone. It's like, man, people are dying, people are leaving. This is just too hard and too difficult. But they just stayed determined and they just persisted and they persevered. One of my favorite quotes comes from Christian missionary Hudson Taylor. He said it this way. He said, first it's impossible, then it's difficult, then it's done. There's your motto for the year. First it's impossible, then it's difficult, and then it's done. What is it that seems impossible in your life this year? Impossible can become possible. It can. It'll go from impossible to difficult, and ultimately it can become done, completed. But the key is persistence and determination. It can be done, friends. There's a powerful scripture in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. Verse 1, and it says we must be determined to run the race that is ahead of us. You got to be determined to run that race. but take inspiration from people who built something over 110 years ago that is still working today and is changed forever how goods get transported around this world, because they looked at this massive impossibility that one country tried and failed, and he said it can be done, and it did get done. And you can get it done this year too. Stay determined, persist, persevere, and make the impossible in your life become possible. Happy New Year.
You've been listening to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode.